you guys aren't in conflict with each other all the time, if we can focus on the kids, we might not have identical rules, but we can have similar rules. Hi, I'm Amy Ambrozich of Dare to Parent, and today I'm visiting with my friend, Dr. Michelle Deering, on Mother-Daughter Connections.
Welcome to Mother-Daughter Connections, the show dedicated to educating, encouraging, and equipping moms to build lasting, meaningful connections with their daughters. I'm your host and mother-daughter relationship personal trainer, Dr. Michelle Deering. My heart is to be of help to you. I believe that your relationship with your mom is the foundation for your future success, personally, parentally, and professionally. Now remember, even though I'm a licensed psychologist, I'm not your shrink on this show. I am, however, here to share my opinions and those of my guests. If you have concerns about your mental health, please seek services from a mental health provider in your local area. Now join me as we pause to consider today's topic. Well, hi there, and welcome to today's show. I am so excited to have with us Amy Ambrozich here with us today. Amy is the founder of Dare to Parent and is passionate about embracing the joys and challenges of blended family life. Certified in both active parenting and the stepfamily.help programs, Amy uses her down-to-earth approach to empower couples to establish a solid groundwork and cultivate a resilient bond and effective teamwork as they navigate the intricacies of creating their blended family. Amy is passionate about helping couples, facilitating parenting workshops for her local school district, guesting on podcasts, and blogging. Amy and her husband have been married for 30 years and have raised 3 children who are now successfully grown and flown. Amy, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to do this with you.
Awesome, awesome. Now, our listeners have just heard just a little bit about you, but in your own words, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing with blended family couples?
I would love to.
Yes.
So I'm the mom of 3 now adults, which is it's nice to be at that stage of life right now where I get to watch them do their adulting.
Yeah.
My husband and I have been married 33 years. I'm the product of a family that my parents were married 65 years. So I'm a product of long-term marriages. The thing that interests me about the step family relationships is the intricate dynamics between a nuclear versus a blended family. And I kind of worked my way into it through parenting education first and understanding that couples need to work together as a team and build that parenting partnership. And that's where I think a lot of couples within the blended family dynamic struggle. So I kind of fell forward. That's my phrase. I fell forward into working with step families, and I absolutely love it because it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together with them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hear you on that. And welcome. So we can connect on the 30-year club with our marriages. You're 33, we're 31 this year. So yay. Okay.
Woohoo!
For the moms out there, no, there is hope. Okay. So just keep at it. All right. So now one of the hazards I always say of folks who come spend time with us is of hanging around a psychologist is that we're always going to go back in time and take the DeLorean. Uh, so if you can take the DeLorean back with me and just tell us a little bit about what life was like for you growing up, because you mentioned earlier that your parents were married 65 years. That's way awesome. That's like a goal. That's awesome. But what was life like for you growing up?
I had a very typical Midwestern middle class childhood. I'm number 4 of 5. I have a sister, a brother, another sister, myself, and then the youngest one came along. Um, it was loud, it was crazy. It was the typical, my sister jokes that we lived kind of like in Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show because
Yes.
the neighbors all knew each other, everybody helped each other out, family was close by, cousins, aunts, uncles, people were always coming and going in the house, but with dad as a firefighter, mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so dad was gone 24 hours, for work, and, well, we say home for 48, but really he worked 2 other jobs to support 5 of us,
Mm,
and going to Catholic schools.
hmm.
So but the things I remember most about my childhood is family dinner. All 7 of us squished around the table in a very small kitchen. Um, just everybody hanging out and doing their thing, but yet there was that sense of safety and um confidence that, like, these people that I'm here with right now, they have my back, and of course we had sibling rivalries like everybody does, but there was just that sense of familyness that I think a lot of people are struggling with now that I see. So I look back at what mom and dad did for us, and those two, I always talk to my couples about being partners in parenting, and those two were
Mm,
the epitome of a role model for that. They had each other's back. Um, there were times where they disagreed, but then they would take that disagreement and you work that out between the two of them, and then come back with a decision when it came, to
mm,
parenting.
mm.
Um, Respect was huge in our house, and if any of us got out of line with mom, she put us in our place, because she was there with us.
Right.
Somebody had to be in charge, and she was definitely it. But
Right.
then dad always backed her up. There was never a second doubt. And he would, if he was, gone on his shift for 24, he'd come back. And if he heard about something that we did,
Uh,
even that mom handled it, he would kind of give us the look, and
mm,
dad had that I'm so disappointed in you look that would just
mm,
kill you. Like, he didn't
mm,
have to spank us already. He would just give us the look. And that was
mhm,
it for us.
mm,
But he would also remind us, like, look, you need to respect your mother. She is working hard. She's doing everything she can for you guys 24 hours a day. You owe her that respect.
mm.
And that was just what we were raised in, very Midwest values, and I treasure that. I'm so glad that I grew up in the times that I did. So it was I don't know, it was an easy childhood. It was just kind of fun.
No, that's cool. I'm kind of wondering about the whole because you know, there's something to be said for the parents being on the same page because kids pick up on if there's
Yes.
was there anything that say just if you can speak for yourself that you preferred one parent over the other in terms of like what you would go to them with in terms of what you share with them?
Okay, my siblings, if my siblings listen to this, they're gonna laugh. So mom and dad had very different ways of dealing with things. Mom was very straightforward. She was the one that, she'd let us cry for 5 minutes and tell us, okay, that's enough. So what are you going to do about it? She was the rock that kind of pushed us, all
Mm,
right, that's enough of that, move on. Not that she wasn't compassionate, but she didn't let us wallow. Like, there was
mm,
never wallowing. We
mm,
were allowed 5 minutes. That was it. Go. What are you going to do next? Dad, on the other hand, he was the epitome of a fabulous listener. And he would just sit and, I don't know, dad had a heart connection with everyone he met. He just was that person that everybody went to.
mm,
He had the best advice. He was a great listener. For me, I was an early bird like he was. So we'd be up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. He'd be having his cup of coffee, and I'd have my little cup of tang. And that's when we would have our morning chats. And he would ask me about school or friends or whatever. And he just gave the best advice. Like, even we've lost both of my parents recently, and
mm,
even to dad's last days, I was with him before it got really bad. And
mhm,
we had these heart to heart conversations, and it was just, he just poured everything into it.
mm.
But then we would always laugh and be like, well, what would mom say? Well, she'd say, get over it and move on, and we would laugh about that because, sometimes in life you need an ear, sometimes you need
Right,
a kick in the
right,
fanny. And
right, right.
that's why they were great as a
Mm.
partnership, because they could give you whatever you needed at that moment.
Right, right, right. Now, I remember once early on when we did like a premarital kind of thing before we got married, and someone said to us, "Remember that you're not competing with each other. You're actually completing each other, in that there's something that you each bring to the table." So to hear that, that your parents had that is kind of cool. So then, like, how were things? I know you had your other 4 siblings, but how are things with your siblings?
Oh, we're close. I mean, there was a big age gap.
Okay.
The first three kind of came within a few years of each other, and then there was
Mhm.
a big age gap between the sister right above me and me, and then another
Okay.
age gap between me and the youngest.
Gotcha.
But those age gaps, while we were growing up, those were hard because I always felt like it was those. I teased them that I was the legitimate middle child, even though I'm number four, because the three of them were kind of like a pod. And then
Uh-huh.
I came 7 years later, and then Missy
Okay.
came 6 years later. So there
Right.
was that middle child thing,
Right.
that I tease them about sometimes. But
Mhm.
honestly, my brother kinda, God bless him, with 4 sisters, he kinda kept to himself, trying to stay out of our way of all the crazy drama that girls bring. But
Mhm.
my sisters and I, we had our issues like all sisters do, but at the end of the day, we always knew we would have each other's backs too.
Okay.
And nothing proved it more than when mom got sick with cancer, and then when dad got sick with cancer, and we lost, each of them, because
Mhm.
the 5 of us, instead of fighting and bickering over who's doing the most work and all of that, we were like all in, like, get out of our way, we're going to figure this out. And it wasn't always easy. We did have
Mhm.
some moments, as
Mhm.
every family does when they go
Yes.
through that process.
Yes.
But at the end of it, we always asked ourselves, what would mom and dad expect of us?
Mhm.
And that we always went back to that
Right.
family
Right.
first, no matter what, family first.
Right.
So even through the worst thing that our family could go through, we all stuck together, and we were like, okay, well, I'll take the, because I'm there, they all lived within 20 minutes of my parents.
Mhm.
I'm a 6-hour drive. So
Mhm.
instead of being able to just run over there every once in a while, I would take a week and
Right.
spend that, and I would
Mhm.
tell everybody else, this is my time back off, and they
Right.
were
Right.
happy to,
Right.
have that break.
Right.
But even then, we were all checking in with each other, and we had this family thread that kept going on,
Mhm.
how someone's feeling and medicines. And we just pulled it together because that's how mom and dad raised us. So,
Right. Right.
and now that they're both gone, I mean, we're always, texting each other, or
Mhm.
we still have the family thread
Mhm. Right.
going on.
Right. Right.
Um, of course, as girls, we're all in each other's business all the time because that's what sisters do. But in a good way. We all
Yeah.
try to support each other, and my brother's there for a good conversation, when we
Mhm.
need to chat with him.
Mhm.
So through it all, I mean, we've had our ups and downs as a
Mhm.
family, but through it all, the 5 of us are still sticking together and talking to each other, which is,
Right. Right.
we're pretty proud of that, because I've seen a lot of families fall apart through those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it goes back to what mom and dad laid as our family foundation. So
Mhm. Mhm.
when things got bad, what would mom want us to do? What would dad want us to do? And that's what we've leaned back on.
Right. Right. No, I hear you. And in terms of your loss and it having been the way it was, just know my heart goes out to you.
Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yeah. I wasn't aware. But so so then I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, when you look at, I guess, your parents, and if you can kind of focus on your mom just a little bit in terms of
Sure.
what kind of messages did you walk away with in terms of marriage, parenting, what kinds of things did you walk away with? Because I know you've been married now 33 years and stuff. So, it's different from my background being raised by a single mom. I didn't have many concepts to draw from. So what about you?
Sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I would say for marriage, mom reminded us frequently that, this is a partnership. And yes, there's going to be times when you're not happy with your partner, but you guys work it out. I remember having a conversation with her at one point in time, and I said, did you and dad ever, like, there had to be, because they could be stubborn at times. Like, was there ever a point where you're like, I'm so over this, I'm done with you? She goes, Amy, where were we going to go? Like, you don't just break up a marriage because you're mad at somebody. You figure it out. You
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. Now, they were both children of the Depression, so they lived the you figure it out
Right.
lifestyle. So,
Right. Right. Right.
so no, it was about respecting your partner. It was about working through the hard parts and
Mhm.
figuring it out together.
Figuring it out. Mhm.
Um, when you're mad at somebody, bite your tongue. Hold and just think through what you're going to say, because you don't want to do anything, rash.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, for parenting, you know, I think it was more the model that they gave us, more so as mom gave me more than anything, because mom was a stay-at-home mom. And
Mhm.
I knew when I was dating we both had stay-at-home moms. And
Okay.
even though I was working towards my master's degree,
Mhm.
We had agreed, like, if we do get married at some point in time, that I would be a stay-at-home mom because we liked the idea of somebody being home when the kids come home,
Right.
and you can just tell mom about your day and all of that.
Mhm.
Mom was great. She was she is the one that pushed me to go for it because
Mm.
marrying him meant I was moving away from home, and I was moving 6 hours, like a state and a half away. It wasn't
Right.
like I was moving, 6
Just down the
minutes
block,
down the
right.
road.
Right.
But she was the one that said, "You need this. You need to do this."
Mm.
And I was like, "But mom, I'm not gonna be here." And she goes, "No, and you, out of all 5 of you, you are the one that needs this the most."
Mm.
And I had to sit with that for a while. Not that I didn't love him and
Mhm.
didn't wanna marry him, but I was like, "But I'm leaving everything I know."
Right.
But again, mom was the rock, and she's like, "Nope, you gotta be brave. You just gotta go try new things. You gotta go do this stuff."
Alright.
Even when I talked about starting my business,
Mhm.
dad was like, but you've got the 3 kids and you're so busy. And she looked at him and said, wait a minute. She worked hard to to get her degree and all of
Mhm.
that. And she needs this, and I was like,
Mm.
I think she's right. I think I do need this. So, mom was always the one that would push us like, no, go
Yes.
for it.
Yes.
What's the worst thing that's gonna happen? And even if the bad things happen, we're here to, help you
Right.
pick it up. But
Right.
she was always the one that pushed me out of my comfort zone, which I
Mm.
needed. I'll be honest with you, I very much
You
needed
needed
that.
that?
So
And it's funny that she actually she saw something in you. I always believe, moms, they have a finger on the on the pulse of what's really going on. So it's neat that she saw that and encouraged
yes.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she had no qualms about pushing me out of that nest, let me tell you.
I have the image of the bird in the nest and the little foot going kicking you out.
Yep.
That's funny. So then that actually makes me wonder, like, what did you major in as an undergrad, and then what was it about school psychology that attracted you that way? How did that happen?
Um, you know, I think I kind of took a right turn when I was supposed to take a left in my journey. But so I majored in clinical and child psych in my for my bachelor. So I
Okay.
did a dual program for clinical and child psych.
Hmm.
I knew I didn't necessarily want to be a psychologist, but I knew I wanted to help kiddos figure out why they're struggling and move forward from that. The school psychology thing, this is where I took a right turn when I think I was supposed to take a left.
Okay.
My dad always said I was supposed to be a teacher.
Okay.
I always loved working in the schools, like volunteering in the schools, and I was a substitute teacher and loved being in the school atmosphere
Uh-huh.
with the kids and stuff. But for some reason, the school psychology kind of piqued me like, oh, but if I can help one kid figure out why they're struggling with learning and help them, work around those things,
Hmm.
that just piqued my interest completely.
Mm.
So that I went through my master's program for that. Just as I was finishing that off, that's when we got married and I moved out to Ohio, and then
Okay.
that
Okay.
threw everything off. So
Right.
instead of getting licensed in Illinois, Indiana, it would have been a dual license. I
Mhm.
moved out to Ohio, and then they wanted me to take another 2.5 years of their program. And I was like,
It's like, no.
no, I just
I feel
finished
you on
7
that.
straight. Yeah, I'm so done. So done. So I worked with the Child Assault Prevention Program, which once again put me in schools. I was working in the Columbus Public Schools
Mm.
with a task force that we did skits and things about bullying and things like that. And then we talked one-on-one with the kids afterwards. Again,
Mhm.
I was back in the schools. I'm like, this is something. Like I know I'm supposed to. Again, Dad was
Right.
right. I
Right.
probably should have just gone into teaching.
Uh,
So but then that led me to, and then I took some time off to be a full-time mom. But
mhm.
I got a call one day from our school counselor where our kids were in elementary school because I was volunteering so much in the building. I kind of felt like, a piece of the furniture in there.
Right, right.
And I would talk to, I would work one-to-one with kiddos, let's, tutoring math or reading or whatever, helping in the classroom. And then I would talk to the parents afterwards and say, hey, I got to work with your kid today, and here's what we did, and try this at home. And what I didn't know was our school psychologist was paying attention to what I was doing. And
Mm.
she calls me one day and she goes, so you're going to come and you're going to get trained with me. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. She goes, well, there's this active parenting program. All the school counselors have to get certified in it. I talked them into paying for you to get certified, and you're going to do this with me.
Nice.
I had no idea what I was getting into, but when Joanne Swick calls you and says, we're going to go do this, you just kind of jump in and go, okay, why
Okay.
not? So,
Right?
but I was again going back to my mom, saying you need your own identity. You need, being a mom is great, but mom, that's what she did was she was mom. And she said, no, you worked hard for your career and things like that. You'll find your way back in. And I think this was, that God wink moment that says, nope,
Mm,
okay, here's your door, go.
mhm,
So I taught with Joanne for a couple of years, and I ended up actually running the program for the district for 3 years, and I loved it. I was working with parents in within the school boundaries
mm,
and teaching them about discipline and communication and all this positive stuff, which then led me to my coaching. Because
gotcha.
my couples would call me and go, look, we get what you taught us in the workshop, but
Mm,
we've got this hiccup at home. We can't figure out how to apply it at home. And that's really where my coaching came from,
right, right.
was just those one-to-one conversations that I will not lie, it lit me up. Like I was super excited to do that. Like, let's meet at Panera. We'll have a
Right?
conversation.
I love it, I love it,
Yes.
I love it. So now in the work that you're doing with step parents, oh, sorry. So that's where you started hearing more about, um, blended families or
Yes.
encountering that more? Is that a correct
Yes,
assumption?
it was
Yeah.
just starting to happen where some of the families that were attending the workshops, they were blended, but that was still relatively new in our area. Most
Mm,
most of them were nuclear families,
right.
but we did have some, and I really enjoyed those conversations. But then in my coaching, I was starting to get calls from people. They're like, "Look, we're a blended family. We're having problems because we're not on the same page. Like
Mm,
he wants to discipline one way, I want to discipline another."
mhm.
About that time, one of my sisters and then the second sister, they were becoming stepmoms. So we were having those
Ah,
conversations within
okay,
the family
okay.
too, like,
Gotcha.
this is so hard. This is not what I signed up for. I don't understand why it's, this way. And
Mhm.
that's when I got certified with Step Family Help. And then I
Gotcha.
continued with my,
Mhm,
other certifications through other
mhm,
programs
mhm.
because the dynamic is so different from a
Yes,
nuclear family. And to me, it's
yes.
like I said at the beginning, solving a puzzle. Like, where do
Right.
these pieces all fit in, and how do I help them see this?
Right, right. So, so you the exposure or people finding you in terms of the step blended family stuff was kind of coinciding with what was going on in your own sibling circle.
Yes.
So in the work that you've been doing with step parents and stepmoms in particular, because one of the things I'd love to kind of just chat about a little bit is, you know, you have the stepmom come in, and then there's the biological mom who may or may not be in the picture. What kinds of challenges do you see stepmoms experiencing with, say, the children and or the biological mom? I know I just asked like a loaded
Lots of
whatever.
questions.
Yeah, but like they're obvious challenges. I mean, I know what I see with moms clinically, but I'm kind of wondering from the coaching that you're doing, what challenges are you encountering or they
This,
encountering?
yeah, this is interesting because I work with the couple, the blended couple.
Mhm.
I get to hear that step family or step parent role, both from men who are stepdads and the stepmoms, that
Mm,
are in relationships too. And sometimes they're both. They're a biological parent and a step parent in that same relationship.
mm,
Um, but the challenges, I would say, my top three that I see is, setting boundaries and role expectations, like who's doing what, what's my role, what's your role.
mhm,
Having those conversations can be hard because it's very territorial. Well, those are my kids. She's disciplining my kids.
mm,
She's stepping in and trying to replace me,
mm,
things like that. Or for a stepmom, she's like, I can't get my foot in. I want to have some input because this stuff is happening in my own home.
mm,
But then I have this other voice coming in from the
mm,
outside saying, well, no, but these are the rules. Those are my kids. So there's a lot of I hate to say it, but it's almost territorial
Yes,
in,
yes, it is.
with it. And as a biological mom, I would have a hard time just handing my kids over to somebody else too that
Yes.
my former spouse has picked. I didn't pick her. My
Right.
former spouse picked her. So there's, it's a building of a trust. Um, which that has to come with good communication first and, respecting each other, understanding that that other person is struggling too. It's okay to say, I don't know how to manage this because I've never done this before
Mm.
for both the biological mom and the stepmom. And it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a competition to see who's more important. That
Mhm.
everybody's important, just at different levels, depending on the situation that we're dealing with.
Mhm.
Communication breakdowns, after we talk about roles, it's, the communication breakdowns, there's a lot of times where there's like, we can't talk to his former spouse, she's impossible or she's demanding, or I'll get a biological mom that says, well, I'm not even talking to his new wife because she parents differently than I do, which I'll get into that a little
Mhm.
bit in a
Mhm.
second. But, or she's making rules that I'm not okay with for my kids, but it's her house. So how do I do that? There's a lot.
Mm.
Scheduling is hard because these kids are going back and forth and things like that.
Mhm.
So, if we can, everybody like take a deep breath and then we talk about things like, okay, how are we going to communicate so that we're not stepping on each other's toes or making judgments? Text messaging is hard because we can, even between you and I,
Yes.
if you
Yes.
and I text each other, we might read something wrong into it because I'm having a bad day or I'm grumpy or whatever. And
Right.
so imagine that conflict within that family dynamic, and it's about kids. It's about the
Mhm.
kids that I birthed and you now have some control over, things like that. So,
Mm.
and there are a lot of digital platforms that can help with that. Differing parenting styles, I would say, is the third one. So it's
Okay.
communication, those boundaries and roles. And when we have different parenting styles, and I see this with my couples, which is what I work with them, that's one of our main topics is blending that parenting style to
Mhm.
find what works best for your family. But if you have rules in your house and she's got rules in her house, if they're not the same,
Mhm.
that can cause some serious conflict. I've got one couple in particular in mind, and it's a free for all at the one house, and it's routines and expectations and chores at another house, not
Right.
overboard, just typically what you should or would normally have in the home.
Mhm.
So these kids are bouncing back and forth, and that's so hard on them because they're like, well, I can watch TV 18 hours a day over there. I don't have to do any chores. I don't have to clean up after myself, but I come home and you make me do all these things.
Right. Right.
Yes, because you need to have these life skills.
Right.
So
Right. So I guess I'm wondering then, I mean, so for all intents and purposes, there are three adults at play or
yes,
at some point in time, because we're just focusing on moms and stepmoms and then their spouse and or significant other.
yes,
Okay. And I'm sure our listeners have watched a whole bunch of reality shows or something like that. So you know what drama can actually be occurring, what difficulties can actually be occurring. But how do you just say for the scenario of the rules at one place are different from the rules at another place? Generally speaking, how would you help even begin helping a triad
mhm.
deal with that?
This is a tough one. I always have to find out what the relationship dynamic is between everybody.
Hmm.
There's actually, it's funny because there's been times when stepmom and biomom do a better
Hmm.
job communicating if they leave the spouse
Spouse out of it.
out of it, because there's that conflict between the ex-spouses.
Hmm.
So there's still that rub, there it's like
Hmm.
sandpaper against sandpaper, and they're just, aggravating each other if they even look at each other. But
Right.
sometimes stepmom and biomom can have a great partnership on how to communicate and what needs to be done with the kids and things like that, which is always super interesting.
Yes.
So I always need to assess that first, like how is that relationship with the other household?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's we can talk things through, which is great because that gives me the end to say, okay, great, because our focus is really on these kids. And if
Right.
everybody wants to focus on the kids,
Right.
you guys aren't in conflict with each other all the time. If we can focus on the kids, we might not have identical rules, but we can have similar rules.
Mm.
And
Mm.
sometimes we have to give in a little bit on each side and have
Mhm.
those similar rules.
Mhm.
So, bedtime might be at 8 o'clock at my house and 9 o'clock at your house.
Mhm.
That 1 hour is not going to completely throw the kids off,
Right.
or
Right.
I've got one couple who, it's 3 hours of screen time at home. That's it. And we're done. Like,
Mm.
go outside and play, go be a kid.
Uh-huh.
The other household is like, you can sit in front of your screens all day long and they cannot have a conversation.
Mm.
So that's where I have to tell them, look, you cannot control what's happening in the other parent's home. You just can't.
Right.
It would be invite them into the conversation.
Mhm.
But if they're like, look, don't tell me what to do. This is my house. And those are
Mhm.
my kids during that time.
Mhm.
You cannot. So then it's parallel parenting where
Okay.
it's like, all right, I'm going to drop the kid off at X amount, at X time, and you're going to pick them up at X time. And we're just going to do a switch where nobody, is yelling at each other,
Mhm.
switch the kids from car to car and just be done with each other.
Right.
And that hurts my heart. It just hurts my heart when those are the families. But those are my couples that I have to say, as hard as it is, you have to let go because you cannot control someone else's household.
Right.
They're going to do what they're going to do as long as it's not a safety issue where this kid's, drinking and
Right.
smoking and doing crazy things at 10.
Right.
If it's not a safety issue, there's
Mhm.
really not a lot you can do,
Right.
to
Right.
step into that. And that's hard. It's hard for that couple to hear. It's hard for
Mhm.
them to let go because they see that it's not the best things for the kids, but
Mm.
we do what we can, and every single couple I've worked with has been different from the others.
Right.
Everybody's got their own dynamic. Sometimes the spouses, we have the exes and then we have their spouses.
Spouses, right.
Sometimes they have a decent relationship, a friendly relationship. And I can kind of negotiate with them and say, like,
Mhm.
okay, here's what we're gonna do.
Right. Right.
And I
Right.
I work specifically with that blended couple, but there has been a time or two where the other couple has been invited in for just a session.
Right.
And we negotiate one topic, like,
Right.
okay, here's what we're going to work on,
Yeah.
but again, it all depends
Yeah.
on their dynamic
And looking for whatever common ground you can find where there can be a win-win somewhere.
somewhere,
And
anywhere.
right.
Yes, I'll
Right.
take little things. And sometimes if I can get them to nudge a little bit on that little thing and we're all,
Mhm.
agree on that thing,
Mhm.
a couple weeks later we can go like, hey, this is really working. Let's try the next step.
Right. Right.
You have to build very slowly.
Right.
So
Right. It is a slow
it's a
process.
Jenga.
Mhm. Right. Right. I'm thinking about something I heard Judge Judy say where she said you have to love the kids more than you hate each other.
Oh my
'Cause
gosh,
yeah.
yes. I
So
may steal that. She's a
Judge
wise
Judith
woman.
Chung, right, right, right. Yeah, exactly. So now, gosh, I mean, time is flying. This would actually be a great place for us to take a break so we
Okay.
can hear a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Has your daughter stopped talking to you the way she used to? Well, that could be for any number of reasons. Maybe something was said or not said, or maybe something was done or not done, or maybe you both just got your wires crossed. Whatever the reason, there are definite research-based principles that you can use to get your daughter talking to you again. And I've put those principles in my Get Your Daughter Talking Now online course. It's a self-paced, 3-module step-by-step program that you can use to fix the lines of communication between you and your daughter, regardless of her age. Just go to www.getyourdaughtertalkingnow.com to start rebuilding your relationship today. And if you've already purchased the program, awesome. Just make sure that you share the link with your mom friends so that they can get in on the healing. The link again is www.getyourdaughtertalkingnow.com. Well, welcome back. I'm here with my friend Amy Ambrozich, founder of Dare to Parent. We have been really just wading through the complexities of blended families, and I guess that's why they call it blended, right? But one of the things I love about you, Amy, is that you bring an element of hope and patience and love to the couples that you work with. So that is always a key, having someone there on your side who understands those dynamics and is actually endeavoring to give you a foundation for navigating those waters. But you mentioned earlier that, we know that you're a daughter, one of four daughters, and then you have a brother. But you're also a mom of three kids, grown and flown. Um, Boys, girls, how many of each?
One girl, our oldest is a girl, and we've got
Mhm.
two boys that followed her.
Okay, great. Awesome. So interesting. Now, having been a middle child, the official middle child yourself, what was it like having your firstborn be a daughter?
It was funny, we didn't find out ahead of time because back in
Mhm.
the day,
Right, right.
we didn't do that back then.
Uh-huh.
So it was fun that it was a surprise that, when it's a girl, that was exciting. I knew about girls, by having been one and
Right.
having, three sisters.
Mhm.
But the funny thing was by that time I had let's see, there were four nephews and a niece. So I was around little boys all the time too. So I was kind of like, whatever happens, happens. God's got a plan. But
Mhm.
she was a ton of fun. We had our moments because she's strong-willed like my mom was.
Ah.
So we did have our moments, but she watching her grow up to be the woman that she is now, it was amazing to see, where that stubbornness when she was 3 turned
Mhm.
into her being a fierce fighter, later on. And she moved to flipping North Dakota right after graduating school. And I'm like, well, no one goes to North Dakota on purpose, dear.
Right.
But she did, fearless as can be. She's like, I'm taking this
Mm,
job and I'm going to teach in North Dakota, which
mm,
then 2 moves later, she's now in Seattle.
mhm.
But just watching her grow up and figure out who she wanted to be and how she wanted to be in the world, it was really interesting to see that happen and to watch her with her girlfriends. It reminded me of me with, my friends growing up, and just seeing um, her tenacity, her strength, her faith, just grow and blossom from year to year. It was interesting to see that happen. And then having two boys after that, I'm like, this is really different.
Right.
Very different. Um,
We love our kings in training, but
yes. Yes, indeed. And now it's fun because I'm a nana. Our daughter has a little
Oh.
girl. So now I get to watch her not only as my daughter, but as a mom to a
Mm,
daughter. So I'm watching
mm,
those two and their bond, and it's amazing. They are
mm,
this cute little team together. They are adorable. So watching now my daughter be a mom
mhm.
to her daughter. It's weird to be as old as I am, but it's really cool to be at this stage of parenting too, where I get to just kind of sit back and watch my kids be the adults they were supposed to be.
That's so beautiful. It's interesting how, because I'm sort of not where you are. Our daughters have graduated college as the time by the time this episode comes out, they've already graduated college, and just seeing them navigate the stuff that they're encountering work-wise and doing the adulting thing. I keep telling them adulting is not a verb. It is a state of being. So the two are going to catch up. But just seeing, I'm kind of curious if you can share about what your relationship, you mentioned, the stubbornness. Okay, so that was something different from you, but it was a characteristic of your own mom. What was it like for you being not having that temperament, now mothering a daughter who's like that?
It was a learning process, I'm not going to lie. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way,
Mhm.
as a first time mom does. And for all
Uh-huh.
you first time mamas with strong
Mm,
willed daughters, I hear you, I feel you, I'm there with you.
mm.
It's it's not easy if it's not your personality too. So it was a lot of learning and a lot of reading. I don't Your listeners won't be able to see, I've got a ton
Uh-huh.
of books.
Yes, I see. Yes.
I'm
Mhm.
like, so how do I fix this relationship? So,
Uh-huh.
um, but through all of that, I think she and I were growing up together because I was learning how to be a mom at the same
Mhm.
time that she was, doing her thing. And
Mhm.
it taught me a lot about patience. It taught me a lot about what works and what doesn't discipline wise with a strong-willed child versus, a more easygoing personality.
Mhm,
And she wasn't difficult all the time. And we
mhm,
had so many fun adventures together. And she was in, brownies and, we did all the little girl things that she did.
uh-huh,
But in those moments, that's when I found myself questioning my own ability to be a good mom, which is a really hard thing. You're like, well, why do I suck at this?
mhm, mhm,
Was
mhm,
really kind of my theme for, for those hard moments. Like, I don't understand. I had a very dear friend. She was raising a boy and then a girl,
uh-huh,
and her boy was so easy. Like, he was just this easygoing personality. And I was
uh-huh,
like, I don't understand what I'm doing wrong, but it wasn't me doing anything wrong. It wasn't my daughter doing anything wrong. It was a difference in our personalities, and we just
right,
had to find that common ground of how do we resolve this together.
right, right,
Which took some time for me to figure it all out.
mhm,
Which those are now the techniques that I teach my couples all the time with when
mhm.
we're talking about discipline. So yeah, there were moments but those moments that we struggle, as those are the moments where we grow the most.
Yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's something I say here all the time. It's like those points where you feel like there is a rift, it's actually an opportunity to learn
Yes,
something and model something different than what you had experienced earlier in your own life. So
yes,
that's awesome.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you.
And it was funny because I would call my mom because back then there wasn't, Zoom
Right,
and
right.
video chats. Like,
We
it was a
actually
long
called.
distance phone call. It was and then you had to pay the bill at the end of the
Right.
month.
Right.
There were times where I would call my mom and I'd be like, I'm at a loss. I'm just literally at a loss for what to do. And thank God that she was on the other end of that phone. And dad would be there too. But
Mm-hmm.
mom would be like, you just have to remember that she's finding her way. She's
Right.
finding her way. And I'm like, yeah, but it's sometimes really hard.
Right.
She said, you think I don't know that? I raised 5 of you,
You might.
and not all of you were easy either. So,
Oh,
just
God.
having someone to talk to was helpful too
Mhm.
during those, and we all go through, any mom has
Yes.
those doubtful moments of,
Yes.
am I doing this right? Um, our firstborn, really quick story, firstborn
Uh-huh.
had colic, like full blown
Mm.
awful colic
Ooh.
from like 2 weeks on.
Mm. Mm.
It was like 3 months. I was not sleeping. I was
Mm.
up all night. I was up all day. She was just miserable, and my heart hurt so bad because I couldn't fix my baby girl.
Mm.
And I remember at one point in time, it was like 2:30 in the morning. I'm sobbing. She's screaming because her tummy hurt. I'm walking in circles, in our house, and my husband comes down. He's like, "What is going on?" And such a proud mommy moment, you guys.
Uh-huh.
I said to him, "We have to take her back." And he looked at me and said, "Take her back where?"
Where?
To the hospital because I don't know how to do this. I've
Oh.
broken her, or I'm not good at
Aw.
this, or and of course I'm sobbing
Yes, I'm
hysterically
sure
because
I
I've
hear.
not slept for 3 weeks.
Right.
Like, give me the baby, go sleep because
Right.
there's no return policy on these things. So, but for all the moms out there,
Mhm.
we do have those moments where like
Yes.
I don't know what I'm doing. And it's okay to say I don't know what I'm doing. That's what coaches are for. That's what
Right.
you're there for, Dr.
Right, right.
Michelle. Is like,
Yeah.
we've got you in those hard
Yes.
moments, ladies.
Yes, yes, totally hear you on that. And actually, that funny story kind of reminds me of something that just happened with my youngest the other day because she was, she felt sick. She was actually not well, but she started a new job a month and a half ago, and she was struggling. It's like, do I go to work sick? Do I not? How do I navigate that? And at one point, she turned to me and she's like, "Can I go back inside?" And she points to my stomach. And I was
No,
like, "No,
that's a
no
hard
can
no.
no can no can do." So I just related to that as you were talking about that moment with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're here for you moms. Just know you're not by yourself. And there isn't anything that cannot be fixed per se in that regard. You just, reach out to, Amy if you're in that situation where you have a blended family, just don't know what to do. I'm here if your mom and you got that specific thing going on with your daughter. I guess I'm curious as to how your husband compliments you in or has complimented you in the raising of not just your daughter, but also your sons. What has that been like?
He and I are very opposite personalities, which um, has served. There's times when I'm not sure it's serving us well, but we had to
Mhm,
find our way through those moments, right?
mhm,
But
mhm.
as parents, I had more baby experience because of my sisters having their
Right,
kids
right.
before I even got married. So I had lots of baby experience, like
Gotcha.
change them and the whole like I get this.
Right.
Um he literally zero baby experience when we went into this whole we're having
Mm,
kids thing. So that was interesting because we were kind of learning and growing together. Like
yes.
I kind of knew what I was doing, kind of sort of, but when it's your own, it's a whole lot different because when they start
Mhm.
crying, you hand them back to your sister. Well, he
Right.
thinks it was fun.
Yep, yep.
But when they're your own, you're like, oh, and here we are. So but I'm very emotion based, half Croatian, half Italian. We live on, we work through our emotions loudly.
Yes,
My
yes.
husband, on the other hand, is very low key. He's very quiet. He's very introspective about things. So that balanced me out. He balances out my crazy,
Mhm.
which was a huge help. There were times where I would be like at the edge, of
Uh-huh,
losing things.
uh-huh.
And he'd be like, all right, hold on a second. And I would just step back and let him step in. And that was
Mm,
what we needed at the time.
mm.
There, so like my mom and dad balanced each other out,
Yes.
my husband and I balance each other out. And
Right.
my mom said this will be good for you that the two of you are very different because two people like you would not be a good thing.
No, right. Poor kid, poor kid.
Yes,
Right.
we fill each other's gaps, we
Yes.
balance each other out.
Yes, yes, yes,
So yeah,
yes.
so throughout it all, and there's been times where I've been parenting through emotion,
Mhm,
and I realize I have to rein it in a little bit, and I sit down and talk with him and go, okay, for the big issues, we sit
mhm.
down together
Yes.
and I'm like, okay, this is how I'm feeling about this. And I'm really
Right.
worried about it or, worked up about it or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Him being the introspective person that he is, he'd think about it for a little bit. He'd be like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or we could do it this way or that way. So, it's that give and take that couples have that we need
Mhm.
to lean into each other's strengths.
Yes.
Finding those sometimes is hard, but when we do find them, and I actually do this with my couples,
Uh-huh.
like week 2, we work on strengths.
Good.
And but finding your partner's strengths, you're like, okay, good. I have someone that can fill that gap for me because this is not my wheelhouse. This is not my thing. Or, he'll balance me out when I'm really worked up about something. He'll calm me down and say, all right, hold on a minute. Let's think
Mhm,
through this whole thing.
mhm, mhm.
And we learn to figure out making those big decisions. Sometimes one of us, would take that step back and go, I think you're right, and or vice versa. So
Mhm, mhm.
I think through the 33 years we've managed to work through the majority of it together pretty well. I mean,
Mhm.
of course there's been
But
moments when
the
you're
right.
with anybody for 33 years.
Right.
You're gonna have those
Yes.
moments, but
Yes.
for couples, I always say find out what your partner's strengths are and
Yes.
let those fill in where those are your weaknesses, because they're going to have your back in those moments.
Yes. No, and actually, one of my favorite lines from Rocky, the first Rocky movie, is when he says, Paulie's like, what is it about that Adrian person? He's like, she got gaps, I got gaps, together no gaps. And I'm just like, okay. I was like, okay, Sylvester. I
There we
love that
go.
part of the script. I love the part of that script. So I love that that's how you work with your couples, which is awesome. Time is flying by when you're having fun.
Yes.
So I have just a couple more questions. One is if you could look back to yourself, your younger self, what advice would you give yourself, either as a mom, a daughter, or just a woman in general?
Oh, because I was very introverted and I tended to be, the kid at the back of the room leaning up against the wall.
Mhm.
Get a little braver with, who you are, own who you are a little bit louder. For those of us that are introverts, it's okay to own that.
Yes.
Um, because I did not. Um, as a mom, give yourself space and grace. You are learning through every age and stage of your child's development. You're learning how to be a mom. And even if you have multiples,
Mhm.
like you and I did,
Yes,
our
yes.
kids are not the same people, all three of
Right.
them. Like they all come
Right.
out with their own little personalities and their likes and dislikes and all of that. So give yourself space and grace to learn as you go through each of those stages with each of the kids. And don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. You're going to make mistakes. There's a
Yes.
million things I wish I could go back and redo. But it was part of my growing process as a mom. As a woman, I would say, don't be afraid to, so how do I want to phrase this? Don't be afraid to share both your strengths and your weaknesses. We're very good about knocking ourselves down, but don't be afraid to share what you love and what you're good
Mm.
at. And not in a bragging
Mhm.
way, but just like, no, 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 this is something, like people ask me why step couple coaching? I don't know. I feel like God put this in my heart and I love doing it. And I'm pretty good at sitting down and listening well to my couples.
Yes.
Own who you are and what instincts you have and trust those as much as
Mm.
you can. So yeah, and just pat yourself on the back at the end of the day for at least three things that went well or that you did well. Because so often we go to bed and we think, oh my gosh, that sucked. That was an awful day. I was a terrible mom. I yelled a lot. But find two or three things that you're like, okay, that went well. Because when we
Mhm.
go to bed with something positive in our head,
Mhm.
it's going to bring us a little bit of peace that, okay, I can build on that tomorrow. This thing went well. Tomorrow I'm going to build on that and
Yes.
move forward.
Yes. No, I love that. I love that. I love that. And it serves as a nice reminder to myself too. So that's cool. Thanks so much for sharing that. Um, so usually I ask folks who visit with us three things, a favorite tip, which you've given us lots of advice already. So uh if there's one of those that you just want to reiterate, a favorite tip, a favorite resource, in addition to the stuff that I know that you have for our listeners, yay, and a favorite quote or encouraging set of words.
Ooh, I'm
Everything
going
you've
to
said has been encouraging, by the way.
Oh,
I'm just
thank
like,
you.
yeah.
I try. I'm going to combine the first and the third
Okay, go ahead. Uh-huh.
and go with Maya Angelou's. If you know, when you know better, you do better. Because that goes right back to that space and grace. As we
Mm.
learn and we grow, we're going to do better. So as you know better, you do better. I love that.
Yes, yes,
Um, Favorite resource for step families, I
yes.
highly recommend reading Ron Deal, The Smart Step Family.
Okay,
He's got the Smart Stepmom, the Smart Step Dad. He's got just a
oh,
litany
good.
of books
Okay,
that are so well written.
okay,
In fact, I'm a recognized Smart Step Family therapist through Ron,
okay.
through his program. His stuff is phenomenal. So if you're looking for a resource, a book to read or whatever, go to
Cool,
Ron Deal because
cool.
he's got you covered.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So, is there anything coming up down the pike for you, business-wise, personally, whatever it is that you want to share with us that you're excited about?
I am. While we're taping this, I'm developing a program which by the time this comes out, I'm hoping
Uh-huh.
it'll be out there ready for them,
Yes.
called the Blended Family Blueprint. And it's going to be a series of steps that couples can work their way through. There'll be coaching from me. I'm anticipating it being where there's, office hours during the week that I hop in and I
Mm-hmm.
answer questions, things like that. I don't know the final product, what that's going to look
Okay.
like. So I encourage your listeners to
Yes.
look for that. And they'll find everything on my website at
Yes.
daretoparent.com, of course. But
Yes.
that's my goal is to get the blended family blueprint ready to go and launch because it's going to give beginning to blend couples or those that are dating and be about to get engaged or
Mm-hmm.
engaged in that process.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to give them that family foundation that we don't normally talk about in
Mm.
premarital counseling because a
Yes.
lot of premarital stuff is all about, nuclear family based. And
Right.
there's so much stuff couples need to know ahead of time so that they don't become the statistic of 73% that end up in a divorce. So
Right.
I want to give you the tools that you need for your toolbox so that you are ready to handle those step family challenges. And that's what I'm working on right now.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited to have that resource made available to our listeners. That's daretoparent.com,
Yes,
where
ma'am.
that's your website. I believe there's also a bit.ly/step family strategies freebie that you have for us, as well as D as in dare, T as in two, P as in parent, the number 10, and then steps as another bit.ly/ link. But I'll have all of that information in the show notes. Amy, thank you so much for coming and spending time with us here today. I hope, moms, that you are encouraged no matter where you are in your journey of motherhood, whether it's, in a nuclear family, whether it's in a blended family. Just know that healthy mother-daughter relationships are possible. They just take one curative connection at a time. I'll see you next week. You've been listening to Mother-Daughter Connections with me, your host and mother-daughter relationship personal trainer, Dr. Michelle Deering. Thanks so much for joining me today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Share this episode with a friend so they don't miss an episode. And download the resource in the show notes. Until next time, remember to pause to consider how you can connect intentionally so you can improve relationally with your daughter.